This happened when I was around 13 or 14, so some of the details are a little fuzzy, but it's one of those memories that randomly pops into my head and makes me uncomfortable. I lived with my mother and younger sister at the time, and my bedroom faced our backyard. Nothing strange had ever happened there before, so I never thought much about leaving the curtains just slightly open at night. One night I woke up for no real reason. I remember checking the clock beside my bed, and it was just after 3 a.m. I wasn't scared or anything, just annoyed that I had woken up. As I rolled over to go back to sleep, I noticed someone standing outside my window. At first I honestly thought it was my mother because the figure wasn't moving. I sat up and stared for a few seconds before realizing the person was way too tall. The top of its head was almost level with the top of the window frame, which should have been impossible. I completely froze. I didn't scream or move because I was convinced that if it knew I'd seen it, something bad would have happened. After what felt like forever, it slowly raised one hand and tapped on the glass 3 times. Not hard, just enough for me to hear it. Then it stood completely still again. I pulled the blanket over my head like a little kid and stayed there until I eventually fell asleep without even realizing it. The next morning, I ran outside expecting to find footprints since it had rained earlier that evening. There wasn't a single fucking mark anywhere beneath my window. I told my mother what had happened, and she brushed it off as a nightmare. The weird part is that a few years later, while we were talking about creepy experiences, she casually mentioned hearing 3 knocks outside her bedroom window that same night. She had assumed it was an animal, and she never bothered looking. One Friday night, my 2 other friends, all called Mia, Clara, not their real names, and I decided to go to a small Greek restaurant for dinner. We were celebrating Clara's 21st birthday. I took an Uber to the restaurant and arrived at around 9 p.m. due to traffic. The restaurant was small and near closing time, so there wasn't that many people. The 3 of us sat down and started eating. Mia asked if Clara and I wanted to crash at her house after dinner to hang out. Her house was a 7-minute walk from the Greek restaurant. We all agreed. By the time we finished eating, it was already 9:50 p.m., about 10 to 15 minutes before closing time. We paid for the bill and walked out of the restaurant. Mia suggested that we walk to her house instead of paying for a whole 1-minute drive for an Uber. Her house was only a 7-minute walk. So here's where the scary stuff starts. About 5 minutes into our walk, Clara and I were chatting when all of a sudden Mia started to speed up. Clara and I stopped speaking, and I suddenly got the feeling I was being watched. I looked over my shoulder only to see a person wearing a gray hoodie about 10 feet away from us. The neighborhood was dead silent, other than a few cars passing by every once in a while. I looked back behind my shoulder again, and I kid you not, this man started running towards us. I screamed and we all started sprinting to the nearest building we could find. We ended up going into a nearby bar and Mia started crying. I called the police and Clara called her boyfriend to come pick us up, who lived 20 minutes away. And then Clara's boyfriend drove us all home.